Terrifier 2 is a recent slasher film written and directed by Damien Leone, and it's about a killer clown that carves people up for 2 hours. Now, Terrifier 2 is a film that I honestly didn't really have much intention in seeing, because not only have I not really seen the first one, but also it's because even though I really do love the horror genre, I'm holding a horror film festival tomorrow, which by the way is at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so please be there. It's going to be a live stream, streaming a bunch of people's independent creative works, including my own at the very end, so please be there for that. That would be amazing. But as I was saying, even though I love the horror genre, when it comes to slasher films and really gore horror in general, even though I enjoy them, it's not really the type of horror films that I really seek out. Even though I can have a lot of fun with them and really appreciate them for what they are, they don't really represent the reasons as to why I love the horror genre. But since everybody was pretty much praising this film, since it's also a low-budget independent film that is making millions of dollars, so I admire the hell out of this film for being produced for less than $250,000 according to Google, and at this point, about to hit $7 million in the box office. That is an insane and impressive success story if I ever heard one. And I asked all of my friends who have seen Terrifier 2 if it was necessary to watch the first one before watching the sequel, and they all said no, it's not necessary at all, actually, so it's perfectly fine if you just go into the second one and enjoy the experience. And after watching Terrifier 2, I am so glad that I watched it, because this was such an enjoyable and fun and just overall batshit gore-tastic experience. This is a film that I could immediately tell is going to be an instant classic. This is a horror film that is going to be a must-watch every spooky season. And, there's a lot of reasons why I really did enjoy this film, but I kind of went into this film expecting just a dumb, fun slasher film. And in a way, that is exactly what I got, but I wouldn't really go as far to call this film dumb, because the direction is actually very stylized. There's actually quite a bit of delicacy to how this film was presented. And as I mentioned, a lot of style to it that really elevates it and gives it personality. I expected to kind of dislike a lot of the characters and thought I would just have to deal with how cliche and idiotic they all are. And don't get me wrong, there is some of that in this film, and I'll definitely get into that later. But when it comes to the central characters in this film, especially revolving around the family dynamic we have with the sister, the younger brother, and the mother, honestly, a lot of that stuff was actually quite compelling. It's not something that's super original or anything, but it was actually well thought out and effective enough for me to really root for these characters to, prevail and not get killed by the clown. The main character in this film, Sienna, that's played by an actress named Lauren Lavera, I think she did a pretty damn good job. She's only been acting for maybe 4 or 5 years now, or at least professionally in TV shows and movies. And again, this is a really low-budget horror film, so that's why I was kind of expecting all the acting to be kind of mediocre. But it's not the case. I would say that the vast majority of the performances in this film are actually believable and are delivered quite well. And you know what? I actually really dug the mom character in this film, played by Sarah Voigt, because it's a little weird, because there's an element to her performance where you can kind of tell that she's acting, but the amount of effort that she puts into her performance when it comes to being pissed off and stressed out, not only is it admirable, but it's actually really entertaining. But the point is that I do think that the character writing and some of the story elements to this film is actually a huge reason as to why this film works so well and kind of puts it above your average slasher film. Because when it comes to the villain of this film, Art the Clown, which by the way is one of the best villains that I've seen in a slasher movie ever, you always just can't wait to see what he does next in a really fucked up kind of way. Which makes it to where the audience has this complex relationship with the characters on screen, because the characters in this film, again, when it comes to the main characters, are actually likable and you want to see them prevail. And in one way, you really want Art the Clown to get what he deserves, because he just absolutely tortures some people and kills some people in this film that, at least for me, I actually liked. So, in your average slasher film, a lot of the time, pretty much all the characters are insufferable, and you actually are in some ways just rooting for the villain the entire film. And that's not really the case here. Like, even though you're very much entertained by Art the Clown, you do eventually kind of want to see him get his shit rocked. And I think that complex relationship that the audience has with these characters is what makes this an interesting experience. And as I mentioned, Art the Clown tortures people in this film. And when I say that it's brutal, I mean, it's probably the most brutal slasher film that I've ever seen. Probably one of the most brutal horror films that I've seen, period. Because even though I've seen some gorier horror films like Brain Dead or something, that's a fantastic film as well. In terms of just sheer brutality, this probably takes the cake. I mean, I was appalled at how far some of these kills went. I mean, there's one kill in particular that happens pretty much in the second act of the film that occurs, I'll just say, on a bed. And just the level of sheer gore and brutality and torture in that scene is just, I mean, I was downright flabbergasted. There is just so, like, it gets to a point where you think that it's done. Like, it already goes on for so long and you think it's done. And then it tricks you and it just continues to go on. And I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing in a way. I mean, it's really shocking shit. And it's not just that kill scene. I mean, all the kills in this film have a huge element of shock value and really go all the way with it. And I think that's a huge element as to why this film works and it's very entertaining, is that there's no boundaries here with this film, and it makes it a very entertaining watch. Now, what does that say about us as human beings, that we enjoy watching shit like this? I don't know. It's probably not a flattering reality, but it's a reality nonetheless. And I wanted to make a quick comment about the aesthetic value of this film because, again, for a low-budget horror film, this film looks absolutely crisp. And one thing that I noticed outright throughout the entire experience was how awesome the lighting was. I really love the way that this film used red and blue lighting throughout its runtime, because it's kind of subtle here and there, and then at some points it goes all the way with the red and blue lighting, but either way it's always there. And there's something about that aesthetic value that makes it very eye-popping and makes it engaging, and also kind of encapsulates the overall mood of the film. Now, when it comes to criticisms regarding this film, the most salient criticism that I could really give it is the fact that it does run into a lot of those horror tropes and cliches that, you know, I think a lot of people are just exhausted of. And it mostly has to do with certain things like, oh, this character is walking towards something that is so incredibly sus that nobody in their right mind would continue to walk towards. You know, a character is just standing still in an area where, you know, obviously they would be running away in that situation. Overall, just at times, it definitely runs into that whole thing where characters are just making really dumb decisions and having really nonsensical reaction to things that, again, people like myself are just, we're just tired of that shit in horror. And also there's a scene in this film where a character is going through a sketchbook and there's an image in that sketchbook that is focused on, and it basically just gives away the ending. Like, the way it's hinted at and the way it's obviously trying to foreshadow the film, it really takes away from the ending's power. And I feel like the ending would have been a lot more impactful if there wasn't that scene that was doing a clear piece of foreshadowing for it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed my journey there, but it made it to where I was just kind of waiting for the ending to finally get to that moment that was hinted at before. But one last thing I wanted to say about this film in terms of something that I actually really liked about it was the musical score, because pretty much from beginning to end, there's this reoccurring 80s retro wave synth type score to it that is just really cool. Like, I mean, I don't know, I'm a sucker for that kind of sound. So to see a modern slasher film that is actually, you know, pretty damn good, you know, have that musical score that embodies the era that slashers were absolutely huge in, which is obviously the 80s, was just really refreshing in a weird way and was really cool to watch. And I do understand that there's other films that have kind of done that before, like Adam Weingart's You're Next. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I do have a soft spot for that movie. I do find that movie enjoyable as well. But to me, like, Terrifier 2 is, I mean, it's a better film. So I'm going to give Terrifier 2 a strong 7 out of 10. Yeah, this was a real bloody good time. I know that Halloween is in a few days, so if you haven't gotten the chance to see this film yet, I highly suggest you going out and checking this film out, because to me it's a must watch before Halloween ends. I mean, even if you don't get to watch it before Halloween ends, just find some time to watch it eventually. But that's all I gotta say about Terrifier 2. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, just give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.